So I've had a lot of mamas lately ask me questions about the RSV shots. And so I thought today I would give you a little bonus episode and read you an article that I came across that really digs into this topic quite well. So buckle up, let's dive in. Are you a Christian woman yearning for a beautiful, joyful pregnancy and birth with a focus on God, not medical tests? Are you worried the birth you want isn't possible and you're tired of being treated like an accident waiting to happen? Hey mama, I'm Lori, host of Your Birth God's Way. I'm a certified nurse-midwife now, but I wasn't always. After working for nearly 20 years in the broken maternity system, I too was in your shoes wondering how I could have the birth I wanted and that I felt God meant for me to have. I found a secret that has actually been known since the beginning of time. God's way is the best way. Spoiler alert, God made us and our babies, and He knows us best. He designed us perfectly for pregnancy, birth, and nourishing our babies after birth, if we work with His design and not against it. In this podcast, you'll learn how to be healthy and have joy during this time of life that will be over before you know it. So if you're ready to reclaim your birth and your babies for His glory, go turn on a few episodes of Bluey for that little one on your hip so you can put the focus back on you for a few minutes with me. Okay, so I came across this article. It is not from a journal. It is from childrenshealthdefense.org, and I hope that you all are familiar with this website. If you're not, definitely go check it out. It has lots of good analytical looks at the reality of the pharmaceutical industry, vaccines, all that good stuff. So I'm going to read you the headline, and then I'm just going to dive in and read this to you because my analysis is not going to be nearly as good as how this was laid out. So the headline is GSK, that stands for GlaxoSmithKline, and Pfizer RSV vaccines for pregnant women, increased risk of preterm births. GSK ended its trials, but FDA approved Pfizer shots. Okay, FDA approved Pfizer shots. So let's get into this. This is by Brenda Belletti, PhD. GSK on Thursday provided more details on the clinical trials for its maternal respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV, vaccine. The company halted the trials and stopped developing the vaccine in February 2022 after identifying an increased risk of preterm birth among vaccinated mothers. Marinate on that a little bit. The details published in a peer-reviewed article in the New England Journal of Medicine came after GSK previously reported the increased risk and subsequent termination of the trials to regulators, GSK's investors, and in the press. According to the NEJM, that's New England Journal of Medicine article, GSK was unable to identify a mechanism by which the vaccine caused the preterm births. However, the company also couldn't identify any causes other than the vaccine being investigated. Although GSK ended its trials due to the preterm birth safety signal, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, in 2023 approved Pfizer's RSV vaccine for pregnant women, even though Pfizer also reported elevated rates of preterm birth among vaccinated women during clinical trials for the vaccine Abrysvo. I think that's how you would pronounce that, Abrysvo. Pfizer said the rates of preterm birth during the Abrysvo trials were not statistically significant. However, the FDA limited approval of the vaccine for women in weeks 32 to 36 of their pregnancy. The authors of an editorial that accompanied the NEJM article noted that although Pfizer's FDA-approved maternal RSV vaccine is bivalent and GSK's RSV pre-F3 MAT is monovalent, how you like that name? It's monovalent, the vaccines are otherwise similar. They also argued that RSV, quote, poses a substantial burden, end quote, to infant health, and that in considering maternal vaccination, risks and benefits had to be carefully weighed. Dr. David Healy, a drug safety expert, told the Defender he didn't think most people were aware of how serious premature birth is for both infants and mothers. Healy said, quote, "It leads to having a shorter lifespan, hypertension, ischemic heart disease, types 1 and 2 diabetes, lipid disorders, and chronic kidney disease. Any mother who does her research, and women who give birth do more research than any other group of people on the planet, is going to find this out and be very worried, end quote. Healy said in addition to the risk to the baby, the vaccine also increases risk to the mother. There is an increased hypertension risk on the GSK and Pfizer's identical vaccine, he said. Quote, increased hypertension in pregnancy, especially preeclampsia, has long-term health consequences for the mother, rather like the preterm birth issues for her infant, Healy added. RSV is a common respiratory virus that usually causes mild, cold-like symptoms, but in rare cases can lead to hospitalization and death in infants and the elderly. By the age of 2, 97% of all babies have been infected with the RSV virus, which confers partial immunity, making any subsequent episodes less severe. Midwife and nurse practitioner Mary Lou Singleton told the Defender, as a mother and a pediatric primary care provider, I've had many frightening experiences with RSV. Every few years, the virus moves through the children of my town, and in these bad RSV years, at least a few of the infants and young children in my practice are hospitalized with severe cases of RSV. I am not cavalier about RSV. Prematurity, this is still her quote, prematurity carries greater short and long-term risk to children than RSV. Okay, so she's saying the risk of the shot, which the risk is prematurity, is a bigger risk than RSV itself, even though she has seen the severe cases of RSV. Singleton said that being born between 32 and 36.5 weeks gestation has lifelong negative effects. These babies are significantly more likely to die in the first year of life from all-cause mortality, including RSV, for which they will only be partially protected according to the results of the study on the vaccine, she said. Preterm babies are also more likely to have learning disabilities and behavioral disorders, which affect not only their quality of life, but also the lives of their family members and the lives of everyone who interacts with them, Singleton said. Quote, as they age, they are more likely to develop heart disease, diabetes, and high blood pressure than people who were born at term, end quote. Have you been looking for a course online to help you prepare for your natural birth, but you're sick of having to weed through the content to take out all that new agey stuff or the flat out ungodly advice? Well, I've got some great news for you. There is now a course that will teach you everything you need to know to be fully prepared for birth, postpartum, and breastfeeding from a Christian perspective on demand, taught by a midwife with over 20 years of experience in the maternity world. And that midwife is me. After many years of being indoctrinated into that godless, medicalized maternity world, I woke up to the truth and realized that most of the maternity system in our country is based on lies. I became a doula and then a midwife, and now I help moms like you have a God-led, God-filled birth from an informed position so that you do not have to be led by fear, but rather by faith in God and knowledge of the truth. Inside this course, you will be engulfed in Scripture while learning about God's ways of nutrition, prenatal care, birth, postpartum care, breastfeeding, what dad needs to know, and so much more. In addition to the course content itself, which is available in both video and audio formats, you'll get workbooks for each module so you can take notes on what you want to remember, Christian relaxation audio tracks to use during pregnancy and labor, printable affirmation cards, and the best part, you'll get access to a live question and answer session with me each month to ask your questions. To sign up or learn more, head over to go.yourbirthgodsway.com/course. That's go.yourbirthgodsway.com/course. Now, this is a serious course, and it's only for serious mamas who truly want to have their birth God's way. So if that's you, head over to go.yourbirthgodsway.com/course today, and I'll see you in the course. GSK launched a Phase 3 clinical trial in November 2020 to test the safety and efficacy of its vaccine against lower respiratory tract disease associated with RSV in infants born to women who had received the vaccine during pregnancy. The company initially planned to enroll 10,000 pregnant women in the trials. However, after enrolling only 5,328 women and 5,233 infants by February 2022, the company stopped the trials because monitors detected an increase in preterm births. In the study overall, researchers reported that 6.8% of infants among the vaccinated women were born preterm, as compared with 4.9% of those in the placebo group. In other words, for every 54 infants born to women who received the vaccine, one additional preterm birth occurred. The trial was conducted at sites in 24 countries on 6 continents, with approximately 50% of women located in middle and low income countries, where 97% of RSV attributable deaths occur. Researchers randomly assigned mothers in a 2-to-1 ratio to receive either the vaccine or a placebo between 24 and 34 weeks of gestation. They then tracked 3,426 infants whose mothers received the vaccine and 1,711 infants whose mothers received the placebo until they were 6 months old. In February 2022, an independent data monitoring committee reported to GSK that at that time it identified there were 7.6% of preterm births in the vaccinated group born preterm versus 5% in the placebo group. The, quote, imbalance identified between the two groups continued after all mothers had delivered their babies. By the end of the trial, 237 of the 3,494 infants in the vaccine group, or 6.8%, were born before 37 weeks, compared to 86 of 1,739, which is 4.9%, in the placebo group. That translated into a 37% increased risk of preterm births among vaccinated women. Among the infants born prematurely, very preterm births, which is between 28 and 32 weeks, or extremely preterm births before 28 weeks, occurred in 5.5% of the vaccine group and 2.3% in the placebo group. Neonatal deaths were also higher in the vaccine group, occurring in 0.4% of the infants in the vaccine group, 13 of 3,494, and 0.2% in the placebo group, 3 of 1,739, which they also noted was not statistically significant. The use of statistical significance here to discount, this is a quote from Healy, the use of statistical significance here to discount the existence of a problem is statistically illiterate. There is a very clear increase in risk that should not be discounted in this manner, Healy said. He added, in the GSK trial, 1 in 54 vaccinated babies were likely to have a preterm birth compared with not being vaccinated, and even in these small trials, there were neonatal deaths linked to the vaccine. In contrast, there were no deaths linked to RSV, and we don't have any indications that getting RSV as an infant has long-term health consequences. Any problems there are more likely linked to another underlying condition the child had prior to the RSV. There might be a link to asthma, but even this is dubious. The key point is 166 children have to be vaccinated to prevent one severe RSV infection. Okay, I'm going to read that part of his quote again. The key point is 166 children have to be vaccinated to prevent just one severe RSV infection. That means that 166 children have to be exposed to the risk of the vaccine to benefit just that one that would have the severe RSV infection. Those other 165 would not have ever had a problem. Let me put it like this. Forget the 69%, this is back to his quote, by the way. Let me put it like this. Forget the 69% efficacy. This vaccine has only 0.5% efficacy in absolute terms. Now, this is all statistician speak. I know that can be confusing, but go with me here. The editorial commentary accompanying the NEJM article was written by Dr. Sonia A. Rasmussen and Dr. Denise J. Jameson, who was named earlier this month to the CDC's Vaccine Advisory Committee and was a key spokesperson promoting the COVID-19 vaccines as, quote, safe and effective, end quote, for pregnant women. Noting the researchers in the GSK trial could not identify the mechanism of increased risk of preterm births, Rasmussen and Jameson walked through a series of potential explanations unrelated to the vaccine itself that could cause the higher rates of preterm births in the vaccine arm of the study. Preterm births primarily occurred in low and middle income countries, they wrote. The study was carried out during COVID-19, and ultrasounds during the first trimester to determine fetal age were not done in nearly half the cases. However, they then also conceded that there was no relationship to COVID-19 infections identified, and misclassification of gestational age would have occurred at the same rate in both groups. They concluded that, quote, whether the safety signal in the RSV pre-F3 MAT trial is real or occurred by chance is unknown, end quote. Still, they conceded that the results were concerning enough to warrant post-marketing surveillance of the bivalent vaccine, which is Abrysvo, currently approved and marketed by Pfizer. They suggested that even if there does not turn out to be a link between the bivalent Pfizer's vaccine and preterm births, quote, it is essential to weigh this small risk against the proven benefits of maternal RSV vaccination. Healy came to a different conclusion, noting that, quote, based on the Novavax trial, this trial, and the Pfizer trial, I think any woman who has an RSV vaccine is making a big mistake and has been badly advised, end quote. But, that's continuing the quote, but, he said, I think a lot of American women understand this and most are in no rush to get it, end quote. Singleton said it, quote, would be great if we had a safe and effective way to prevent RSV from ravaging our communities every 3 to 5 years, but we don't, end quote. Instead, she said, quote, we have another risky gamble with the health of pregnant women and infants that will further enrich Big Pharma and increase the already abysmally high rate of preterm birth in the United States, end quote. She said a large percentage of children who get our RSV will need to be hospitalized, but, quote, a very small percentage, end quote, of children with the virus will die. Singleton added, even though RSV has me shaking in my boots every few years as I am arranging transport to the hospital for very sick children in my care, I cannot recommend that mothers risk taking this new injectable technology. We have no idea the extent of the new problems we may be creating with this new drug, and so far the data shows the risks do not justify the perceived benefit. I wanted to read this to you because it shows the very divergent sides of this argument, and it gives you a little bit of glimpse in the statistical manipulation, because while the pharmaceutical industry wants to call these statistical differences noted in this study statistics are hard to say, statistically insignificant, the same differences and sometimes smaller differences are then used to scare mothers into all manner of interventions on the other side. And it's just really eye-opening to see how when it's something that they want, they will manipulate the numbers any kind of way they need to. But when it's something that they don't want, or in this case, they want you to get this vaccine when you're pregnant, they don't want you to pay attention to the statistical differences. They don't want you to think of it as being statistically significant, because if you do think that way, then you're going to choose not to get this shot because you're going to see that this is just not worth the risk. But on the other side, they can take numbers and scare you into being induced and evicting your baby long before it was ready, just for some number that's even less statistically significant than these. You have to be so awake and paying attention and realizing that the information that is used to make the decisions in the medical side of maternity care is highly manipulated and very unreliable. I wanted to read you this article because I really felt like that it went into the intricacies of how these studies are twisted around and how there are medications on the market today that are called safe and effective that are not. They have not been proven so, and yet most physicians will tell you today that they're safe and effective. But is that true? Can you trust them? I think you know the answer to that. I have another article sitting here that I will maybe dive into in a bonus episode next week. I haven't decided. It's a little bit longer, but it's diving into COVID shots. And I think that by now many of you have already realized the manipulation that was done through that whole mess. But if you don't know, or maybe you want to hear some new perspective on it, be watching or listening for a future episode on that, and I will basically do the same thing. I'll just read the article to you and let you make your own decisions, because that's what this is all about, gathering the information and making the decisions yourself, making an informed decision, not a decision based on fear or based on what somebody else said, but what the data actually can show you, or just what your common sense can show you, because at the end of the day, your common sense is more, I almost said statistically significant. That's not the correct term, though. Your common sense is more reliable than any study ever will be. Your intuition as a mom that God gave you, that God put in you, your good walking around sense is more reliable on any day than some numbers in some journal. And that's all I've got for you today. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and I will see you right back here next week. Real quick, if today's episode blessed you in any way, would you head over to Apple Podcasts and leave me a quick 5-star written review? It'll take you less than a minute, but it's the best thank you you can give me, and it will help my show to reach more mamas just like you, so we can all find God's best for our families. I'll see you right back here in a few days.